technology is here to stay. Technology is a game changer. Technology is actually running the banks and NBFCs and stockbroking these days versus the organization running these technologies. Investments, especially from the overseas countries and the shareholders, they will not give you good money if they find that your controls are weak, right? If regulatory comes and penalize you, right, for non-compliance to cyber security, these days your stocks also go down. Finding a right guy is becoming very difficult these days. At least what I have experienced, right? I have not seen much of people or staff who have a strong technical expertise. In cyber security, you need to understand it's a multiple domains, right? You have a governance, risk and compliance, you have security architect, you have security operations, you have SOC. So I think 4 to 5 domains are there where people build their careers.
So the scope of cyber is extremely vast. I think we have agreed on that. But from a BFSI standpoint, so if the top 3 cyber concerns which you as a CISO are proactively planning for. So welcome to yet another edition of the Security Chips podcast. Security Chips is a podcast series of DSCI, and it's an attempt to bring out the cybersecurity and data protection nuances by engaging in conversations with thought leaders from the vast field of security as well as data protection. So the theme that we have finalized for today is financial sector cybersecurity. Because financial sector, the way it has been transforming, we thought let's talk about the nuances that go into tackling the cybersecurity complexities for the financial sector. And the guest that we have for today is Mr. Shanker Ramrakhiani, who is the CISO for IIFL, or as we all know, the India Infoline Group. Welcome, Mr. Shanker. Thank you so much for being part of the podcast. So, before I actually delve into the subject matter, I think it would be interesting to know your journey so far. Your entry into the cybersecurity world, how it happened, and what's been the journey like so far.
Sure. And firstly, thanks to DSCI, for giving me the opportunity to share my experiences. And so about my journey, I started my career in 2005, with Wipro. So primarily it was a more kind of a tech support role in the technology field, right? So I worked there for almost 1.5 years, and then I moved to a product security company, Symantec in Pune, where I spent more than 4.5 years. So I think from 2007 I entered into the world of cyber security and more on the risk and compliance domain.
Right.
So where I spent more than 4.5 years, did a lot of implementation, pre-sales and post-sales support for all the enterprise security products across the globe. So that was a start. I started my career in Symantec, and now it's almost close to 17 years plus I'm in the cyber security domain, and I would say it's a roller coaster ride, and most of the honestly it's more ups and rather than downs. It's primarily journey has been always upwards towards my career. I spend good amount of time in future generally as a deputy CISO for both the companies, and now I am with IIFL for more than 6 years now, heading the information security and business continuity at the group level.
Right. I'm so glad you mentioned the word roller coaster, because cybersecurity, coming from the field myself, so cybersecurity, the vastness of it simply can be overwhelming, right? So, but rather than I will certainly come to the challenges part of it, down the conversation. But in terms of the high points, which you mentioned that it's been an upward trajectory. So what are those, high points which you would actually call deeply satisfying, as a security leader for you?
Yeah. So I always believe a top-down approach. So one of the most satisfying thing is that nowadays when I go to board, top management, CEOs, or in fact when we interact with CROs, CTOs, and other CXOs, right? Nobody says no to cyber security. They all understand the need, of it and why it is important for the organization. So I have seen as a very positive sign, for my current organization as well as, our, the many organizations that I know, and, a lot of colleagues, we interact. That is one of the positive sign. The other thing is that with the emerging regulations, so I see not only as a CISO, but other regulations like SEBI, RBI, NHB, IRDA, all have been now very focused on organizations to take cyber security very, very seriously. That's why we see guidelines coming every every month, or every quarter on various aspects, which keeps the organization awake all the time. It also keeps cyber security teams, CISO, always in the demand that there is someone to watch you, and that's why you need to put right controls at all the time, and do not be complacent in your journey. Apart from that, there is a huge support from the top management. Okay, especially the board of directors, and the MDs and the chairmen of the organization. They say that we always need to ensure that all controls we implement keep our data, secure, all the time. System should be intact. Okay, without not much, any issues. And apart from that, we also see customers are also playing a very important role, in our journey. They have been also focused. We get a lot of requests from the customers that how we play, how we handle the data. Is the data secured? We are also subject to a lot of audits. Even auditors appreciate that it's not a very easy role to handle.
Right.
So I think these are all the positive signs. Okay, that keeps CISO's life up and running all the time. It's a challenging, but that's why CISOs are always called to the board meeting these days. They are part of all the committees. Okay, they play a very important role. Organizations do not get investments if they from the stakeholders or shareholders, if they see the controls are in poor stage, right? That's why CISO role is becoming very critical to ensure they implement all of them in good spirit, not only just in compliance.
So there are two pieces which I would pick up from this response of yours. One is talking to the board, talking to the management, right? Because I think a lot of organizations would be really ecstatic to even note that the kind of response you have been getting from your board, right? But I think a lot of organizations still are trying to figure out what is the best way to talk to the boards. What is the kind of language which boards would be able to appreciate? Of course, the risk perspective and the business perspective is something that they have a handle on. But what would be what would be your 2 cents as to how should one strategize even about talking to the boards? How do we do that?
I think very good question, and it becomes a very important factor how you communicate to the top management and the board, right? First thing is that not all the board members understand the technical language. You need to make them understand in their own language. You need to now start quantifying the risks, right? You need to see, what are the emerging trends, okay, are outside. You need to make them aware all the time. Tomorrow, if you go and speak to them and you will tell them that the firewall has an issue, or the application has a vulnerability, SQL injection, they will not understand these languages. They will only understand that if the system is getting hacked or the data is getting breached, how much amount of loss the organization will suffer. If we don't comply with certain regulations, let's say with SEBI or RBI, in terms of any of the their guidelines, how much would be the penalty? How much organization will suffer if they fail to implement the guidelines at a certain point? Right. Apart from that, should there be any, for example, ransomware attack, right? What is the strategy to overcome against that attack? So your communication has to be precise. It has to be point to point, and primarily it has to be less technical and more strategic, right? You need to communicate to them in the language that they understand. And that's why CISOs, the biggest, skills that they need is that it's an excellent communication, presentation, negotiation, as well as convincing skills. What things can go wrong, they should be able to, help them understand. By speaking only in the hardcore technical language, which could be the language of CTO or, the security head or the person who's handling the systems, they may not able to understand. So your language should be, precise. It should be in simple words, and give them a good view of the dashboard. Okay, where are the issues? Give them a high level picture of the organization. You may not go explain them point by point, but at least tell them the synopsis of it. So policy, they will not read the entire policy. or entire, let's say, a crisis management plan. But the synopsis of that will really help them, as an person to, because in a board meeting you may get 6 to 8 minutes or 10 minutes max for your session, for you to present the session. You cannot go with 100 pages PPT, right? You have to consolidate that and complete in 2 to 3 slides, and highlight the red flags to them. Right? We always call it that good news can wait, bad news should be highlighted first. That's why you have to be come into that terms and make them ready, right? After all the regulations only say that board is accountable. So it's not only CISO's responsibility, it's board responsibility to ensure organization is in good shape all the time. So communicating in a good language, simple business language helps. Quantify the risk, right? They understand the money, the monetary loss which the organization will suffer. Also give them some alternatives, right? If we don't do this, then what could be the repercussions and all.
Right. So I'm so glad. Another thing which I would pick up from what you just mentioned is the CISO's role, right? I think you have seen it all, across the companies. I do remember that CISO a few years back, almost a decade back, was considered more of an operations-centric role, whereas CISO is, in charge of overseeing everything pertaining to security ops. But now it has, very beautifully transitioned into a more strategic one. So, how do you think this? How do you see this transition, and how do you explain this transition? And are all the CISOs, experiencing this transition, or is it limited to a few?
No. So, as you rightly said, that few years back, security was always a back office, function, right? People in the organization did not want this function because we were always seen as a bottleneck, okay, when it comes to for any approvals or any business projects, because we disallowed lot of things, to users, which created an inconvenience for the, staff and the management. But I would say, thanks to the hackers, right, which actually created a lot of demand, because they started exploiting the applications. Lot of security incidents happened, okay, over the past decade. More than that, organization fueled their digital transformation initiatives. So more business comes with more risk. More application exposed to internet comes with huge risk, right? So these are because the business also grown multi-x, right, for many of the organization. So there is always pros and cons, okay, when we face these kind of momentum. That is why we saw a lot of issues started around data security, data privacy, breaching of the customer info. Ransomware triggered all this point, because earlier the disruption was not there when the security incident occurs, but now if the ransomware hits, organizations suffer for days and weeks or even months to come back to normalcy, because it's a catastrophic and kind of incident where it takes multiple days for the recovery. Though organization may have a sound recovery plan, backups, but that takes times to restore. So earlier it was considered as a back office, but now with the regulatory push. So I will talk about the BFSI. Yeah, there the a CISO role is taken very seriously by the top management as well as the regulation. They are all getting the budgets, okay, and lot of guidelines have been stringent, especially by RBI and SEBI in last few years now. A lot of tech security related initiatives, lot of audits, lot of reviews, gap assessments organization does on regular basis. More than that, it is the investments, especially from the overseas countries and the shareholders. They will not give you a good money if they find that your controls are weak, right? If regulatory comes and penalize you, right, for non-compliance to cyber security, these days your stocks also go down. Organization suffers a cyber incident, again the stocks goes down. So it's a clear, cyber security has become a business issue now. So gone were the days where we were not front-ending the game, but now CISOs are all part of the strategy meets. If business is onboarding any project or application, risk assessments are being done. They are taking our buy-in. We are helping them to clear the required audits and due diligence done by the third party or their investors. So it's becoming a very, very critical role. And after all, we are the control function of the organization. We are not a maker function. We are a checker function. where our job is to check the things deployed by technology and business teams. We are here to identify, proactively identify the issues before the attacker exploits. And with the regulatory becoming very stringent, I think this role will grow, and most of the organizations, I think, will adhere to this part. What I said, but for non BFSI, maybe organizations who are not very in the B2C and less digitally exposed, it will take time. So there will be IT will always have the upper hand, but in BFSI it's primarily technology and security, both go on, neck to neck kind of thing.
I'm taking a step back and for the BFSI sector, because whether it is adopting technology, or whether it is innovating and experimenting with products, or even from a compliance standpoint, I think BFSI almost always leads the way for other sectors and sets an example. Right. So, from a tech transformation standpoint, what do you think, or what's your outlook, let's say, for the next 3 to 5 years, where the overall BFSI is headed? I know BFSI further has so many segments within it, but
yeah. So BFSI primarily, the first goal is that they will never, do something which the regulatory has not given the permission, right? So they will always want to experiment things, right? So in technology, more if you talk about the technology transformation, fintechs would be the first who will adopt new technologies, emerging technologies. Banking will always wait for fintechs and other non BFSI, okay, to evaluate that. So example, cloud. So BFSI were the last industry, okay, or last sector to onboard started onboarding the applications on cloud, whereas non BFSI they started very early. We did it 6 years back as an NBFC, but banks were still reluctant. Then finally the COVID came, and it became boon for many organizations, because physically it was not possible to reach the data centers. The hardware was not there. However, then suddenly the cloud transformation picked up. So where BFSI also gained a lot of benefit. Apart from that, I'll take an example of generative AI, right? So when you talk about BFSI, the biggest concern they always see is the data security and the privacy of the information. The data should not get into the wrong hands, right? They're also worried about the data localization. We don't want our data to store outside India region, right? Especially the PI data, including Aadhaar card, PAN card, financial information of the customer, health information of the customer, and what are the liabilities that they have it. So emerging technologies, I would say. BFSI will always be number 2, number 3. They will experiment things but will not put in production. So that's why they will always take our concurrence, CISO's concurrence, right? Which technology to go for, right? Or if we want to go for it, we will give them the controls. So, for example, generative AI, we will tell them that don't go for open source, but go for, let's say, commercial kind of, a service, let's say with Microsoft Copilot or Google or Amazon, right? Have the instance created in your private cloud. Okay, do the audit of that instance, have the policy. Don't start with customer PI, start with normal business operations. So this is how we operate. So technology is here to stay. Technology is a game changer. Technology is actually running the banks and NBFCs and stockbroking these days, versus the organization running these technologies. So they cannot be compromised on the technology initiatives also, but however you need to balance the risk between the tech and the cyber security.
Right. So I think the scope of cyber is extremely vast. I think we have agreed on that. But from a BFSI standpoint, so if the top 3 cyber concerns, which you as a CISO are proactively planning for, that CISO is also like a firefighting, where you're constantly, you have this on your mind that you have to plan for it, strategize for it. So what would be those top 3 things from a cyber threat landscape or overall concern standpoint?
Biggest risk that we see is the ransomware, because it creates a disruption, right? Attack happened, we saw the intrusion, right? Ransomware disrupts the business because the all the data goes to the hacker. Right. Your systems are not available. You're not able to restore. So that's the biggest threat. And with the emerging Lockbit, which created a havoc even amongst the other Indian organization as well as the globe, right? Ransomware would always be a first I would say dangerous threat security threat, for the CISOs and the organizations. Second, I would say the data breach, right? Data breach can happen accidentally, or attacker, exploiting your data, okay, or, your application system network, and he's gaining the access to the customer data. It will not have any disruption kind of event, but yeah, there will be huge regulatory complications or obligations involved. Customer, especially if it is an enterprise customer level info, right? Customer will come and sue the organization because you failed to protect the customer organization, right? Customer data. There will be huge repercussion from the board. The stakeholders will not invest, so it impacts the brand reputation at the large extent. So data breach is again very risky. It may not disrupt your operations. You will be able to run the business, but other things can go for a toss, right? Especially the brand reputation. People will not start trusting you. Apart from that, if you are taking an investment from the overseas, right, they may not come and invest because they are always sensitive, especially the organizations who are adhering to the GDPR laws. The third and the most threat is that non-compliance with the regulatory. So regulatory and with the way RBI and SEBI are doing the audits, their level of audits are very different now. So they do a lot of deep dive in the work that we do, and with the very compliance guidelines. Non-compliance to regulatory is also a big threat for us, and it will lead to ban. Okay, they may come and ban your certain specific business. Regulatory, the financial penalties, as well as again, if it is a financial penalty or ban, then again your brand reputation goes. His business also gets disrupted. So ransomware is the first. Second, we talked about the breaches, and third is regulatory compliance. So these three are very, very difficult. I would say the challenges that a normal CISO or for any BFSI or industry is struggling.
I would pick the third one. From a compliance standpoint, so one is you are complying and one is you are meaningfully compliant. Because as you mentioned, the stringent guidelines that are coming in. So the regulators, of course, in the financial sector are very proactive. And they are actually, pairing up with the industry to raise the overall posture. But demonstrability is yet another important aspect, that you need to be able to demonstrate that you're compliant. So, how would you go about achieving that compliance in a meaningful way and that you're able to demonstrate it?
Yeah. So the first thing that we want to do is that we need to follow everything in spirit, right? If you're not following the guidelines and if you're finding a third way or midway out of it, we are doing nothing but actually fooling ourselves and the organization, because that's not the long-term plan or which will sustain. So first thing is that you need to map the controls, okay, what you have in place against those guidelines. Then you need to do a assessment that what is you need as an organization or as a CISO, so that you implement that and meet the compliance requirement. Apart from that, get that checked with the independent auditor or third party, right, that you are meeting these guidelines. By simpling, for example, vulnerability assessment and penetration testing, right? Guideline says that organization should do rigorous VAPT for their critical applications or internet facing assets. By just running a scan of those assets does not solve the purpose. You need to do all the three approaches of black box, gray box, or white box. You need to start the journey just like an end user. You need to check all the OWASP parameters. You need to check the business logic. You need to find the issues at the API level. You need to see the where the servers are, server-related vulnerabilities. So it has to be thorough approach. Then only you will be able to meet the compliance and also the required intended objective of the organization. By running a simple scan, it will not give you much, right? And I can show that report to the regulator, and they will say that the VAPT has been done, but is it done in detail? That is why that's the question we need to ask to ourselves and our teams, and that we are not doing justice to our job. So this is how we should handle each and every control. If firewall it is there to implement, or web application firewall, are we reviewing the rules and policies? Is it the proper appropriate thresholds are configured? Is it giving us the right results? How many false positives are there? SOC, Security Operations Center, by just giving the contract to third party or managing in-house, does not suffice the purpose. Are you reviewing the rules? How much garbage, logs you are getting every day? What all enhancements you are doing it? Are you regularly reviewing the alerts? Is the actions are getting closed on time? So these are all parameters and measurement metrics a CISO has to check regularly. Then only your compliance will be met.
Right. So I think cutting corners may not help. You have to do in veteran spirit, as you mentioned. So talking about the obligations and expectations, one is that CISOs are definitely, from a strategic standpoint, they're helping boards to A, to quantify, and B, to understand the risk and appreciate it a little better. But what we are increasingly seeing is, whether it is the RBI or the SEBI, or for that matter, IRDA and other sectoral regulators, they're also putting those specific obligations on the board itself, right? Board members are expected to have, I don't know, maybe a certain level of expertise to be able to appreciate. So how do you think that boards can take this up? How effectively boards can manage this issue? One is CISOs helping, but what should boards be doing, or what would be your recommendation on that front?
This is the best step, I would say, taken by the regulator to make the board accountable should there be any issue in the organization.
Yeah.
We all need to understand is that good governance is must, right? A CISO cannot achieve everything on its own. From the board, it will always be a top-down approach, okay, which will be followed, okay, in the organizations. After all, board are the one who are reviewing all of these, right, as part of their, regular meets, okay. All the reports goes to them. After all, they are there to, ensure organization is always in good shape, right? Their responsibility is to ensure we meet compliance all the time. So board, you have to make them accountable because after all, they are the governing body of the organization, right?
Yeah.
We are executors after all.
Right.
But there has to be someone to check us. Are we doing our job? And if we are not doing our job, there has to be some direction should come from the top management that, yeah, this thing is missing and it has to be executed, right? Board's member responsibility is not just to see the financials, right? Their responsibility is also to ensure that the controls are working in a desired condition.
Yeah.
That is why we have an audit committee, right? And CEO can be biased. CISO can be biased. That's why you have an independent audit committee,
Yeah.
which reports to the board of directors.
Right.
So to ensure that we highlight the issues, real issues, right? So that before someone comes and exploits, be it external fraudster attack or even the regulator, we should find the issues ourselves and mitigate.
Yeah.
So board's role is very, very critical. They have to handle this. Cyber security is everyone's responsibility, and it has to be always driven from top to down. It cannot be any end user doing everything and board is not giving any direction. That's why if you see all the guidelines, all the policies have to be approved by board.
Yeah.
If you're doing a BCP drill in the organization, it has to be reviewed and approved by board. Board members have to be part of the IT strategy meeting.
Yeah.
Board have to be part of cyber committee meetings. They have to be part of IT committee. They have to oversee the things. And supervision is must. They are after all supervisors. And supervision is must in our domain because it's very critical and, it's an institution after all. Because you are only on depend on one member. It's a 4 or 5 member team, which helps organizations to meet its intended objectives.
Right. And another piece of this overall cybersecurity strategy, which goes to my head also, is that the talent challenge. Right. So how have you been looking at this overall talent, building the talent pipeline from 3 perspectives? One is that attracting enough talent, then nurturing, and finally retaining that talent. So your views on that?
Yeah. So I would say we are facing an acute shortage, right, on finding the best talent. Again, finding a guy is easy. Finding a right guy is becoming very difficult these days. At least, what I have experienced, right? I have not seen much of, people or, staff who have a strong technical expertise. In security, in cyber security, you need to understand it's a multiple domains, right? You have a governance, risk and compliance. You have security architect. You have security operations. You have SOC. So I think 4 to 5 domains are there where people, build their careers. I faced difficult in hiring a good security architect guy who knows in and out how the architecture should be, how to, configure the firewall in a best possible manner, how to ensure all the WAF policies are configured, placing of systems, security layers at, respective systems. So it's facing acute shortage. GRC compliance guys, you have enough in market. People who are doing the audits, who are people, building the, compliance matrices, okay, designing the policies. You have lot of, chunk available in the big fours. Okay, where you can find talent, and even when we do the hiring, we don't see a lot of resumes. We get it. Strong technical person, specifically in the emerging security technologies. Let's say, for example, SIM, security, big data, our web application firewalls. Normal firewall, we get it, but let's say a privileged identity management, zero trust, staff who have a good knowledge on the zero trust, that we have a huge shortage. So it is always the demand versus supply. So in GRC, there is a good demand, there is a good supply. But in these kind of roles, the technical, right? Because tech person has to be technical. CISO is not a technical role; it's primarily a strategic role. But CISO needs people like this. So these roles, we don't have much, talent available. People are still learning, but I think, yeah, we need to build the curriculum, accordingly, in the coming years, where we get these people at a very, early stint. But yeah, right now in these technologies, it is difficult to hire. Who knows in and out, out, or the other. Acute shortage is primarily CDC, cyber defense, people who are monitoring the logs and all. So log reading and taking the required action, predicting what is actually incident or not, security incident response. Again, there is a acute shortage there. So there the demand is so much, but supply is less. So that's why we are relying on multiple partners. But yeah, retaining also, because if we and their demand is also very high. So we are not able to retain these kind of employees many a times in our organization. That is why we source them for the outside partners, or we give as a managed services contract to a good organization.
But obviously, this is a complex problem to solve. But if we were to think about what's the way out, if you were to build or nurture a talent from within, is there a way that you see? Because we at DSCI also believe that the architectural and engineering skills are missing, and they start right at the curriculum level, perhaps at the PG level or UG level, whatever. But what could or how could organizations, hit this particular problem? Is there a way out that you see?
Way outs are there, but the thing is that you need to give them that environment, right? So that they can grow. Right. If the organization is investing in heavy tools and technologies, right? Engineers like them, cybersecurity engineering, people also want to stay and learn, right? But if that guy you are hiring and you're not doing anything in a year, right, and just only relying on the audits, processes and all, those guys will leave. There's one way to that. Invest heavily in the tools and technologies in your organization. That is one way to retain. Apart from that, yeah, compensation is another important factor, because after all, it's all monetary gain, which an individual needs it, right? And third is that there has to be close sync up with the technology team. You need to build a strong relationship with the technology, because these kind of technologies, there is a lot of interference required from the CTOs and all. So you need to ensure that you have a good relationship with the CTOs, so that these guys don't stress out, right? And if your relationship with the CTO is not good, trust me, many of the initiatives don't kick off, right? It fail at the a very early stage. So you need to have a strong relationship with the technology, and this is the way, and give them regular trainings, right? But again, trainings will only clear the concepts. Okay, I can understand what is zero trust, I can understand what is firewall, what is WAF, what is SOC, but implementing, how to implement it, you have to give them live environment to implement, right? So training is good, but that has to be actually practiced on the floor.
So a couple of questions. So you have given fairly elaborative answers. So I'll jump to a rapid fire thing in 5 minutes. But before that, so I think from an authentication and authorization perspective, because that's another interesting topic which I work on. So we have been deliberating passwordless authentication big time, because passwords may not go away directly, but several models, whether it is the FIDO or several other such passwordless authentication paradigms, are already there and and are finding acceptance in the BFSI sector. So what's your take on this future of authentication and authorization from a BFSI sector standpoint?
passwordless is a good technology, which will solve many of the issues, but it will not be a very, fast adoption kind of a technology, because it should also integrate with your legacy apps. BFSI still many of the apps which are legacy in nature, right? So if you want your technologies to, compatible, with passwordless, right? Yeah, it will take time because it requires a lot of in-house development, or lot of upgrades, migration would be needed. That is worst part. The other is that it is too early to say, we don't know, much of the risks, right, using this technology. No technology we can say that it 100%, right? There'll always be loopholes. So passwordless, I'm sure we have seen in the past, many, these kind of software companies have been breached, right? So it is good to, have it in the longer run, but as of now, I think it will continue to weigh with, authorization and authentication kind of, methodology, with appropriate two-factor, authentication, which RBI and SEBI mandated, right, for the, critical apps. So that if one level of authentication gets compromised, second level, you can protect. Passwordless, I would say it will take time, but for at least for BFSI, many organizations have gone for it, but it is not a easy to implement, because it has to be integrated with your overall ecosystem of the organization.
And I remember, I think this was a year back or so, where we were talking to you about zero trust. So, where are you currently in your zero trust journey? Because I think it's a long process. So, where are you currently at?
So we are on our way to implement the zero trust. So we have already signed a contract with Zscaler, who is helping us to build the zero trust, network architecture. So we have, onboarded, started onboarding all of their products, okay, from their suite. So Zscaler, when you say when you say zero trust, it's not only one or two solutions. It's a combination of multiple solutions. So we are on our way. We are still, we are following defense in depth approach. And zero trust, I would say next 3 to 6 months, as an organization at the group level, will have a strong zero trust network architecture. So we are the early adopter, in our NBFC broking space. I think the banking also, ICICI, SDFC have gone for it. So we have also selected a right partner who is helping, where the security controls tools will be deployed at every layer. So when you say zero trust, we want to achieve that every connection coming to our network, it's getting verified, and then we are allowing them based on the level of access. So we are on our way. Implementation has started. Kickoff meetings already done with them. So my IT cybersecurity team, who is headed by Ameya, who's doing the implementation as of now, and we are flashing the updates to board and top management on regular basis. The journey has just started, and next 3 to 6 months we will comply.
Right, because I'm pretty sure a lot of organizations would be looking up to you and perhaps trying to draw cues as to what could be the way to go. So I think, Mr. Shanker, till now you have been very patiently answering questions in great depth and very elaboratively. But next set of questions, if you could just give us those pointed answers, which could be, kind of act as takeaways for the audience as well. So, as a CISO, what's your advice to aspiring CISOs? What should they be doing? Simple.
Keep things simple. Don't think that everything can be done overnight. Okay. Don't forget on basics, and don't fight with technology teams. That's it.
Okay. And if you were to pick, I know it's very hard to answer, but if you were to pick one thing that you as a CISO would want to do in the BFS, while you are in the BFSS space, what would that one thing be that you would want to focus all your energy on?
So the biggest thing is that building a robust resilience, setup, because security, cyber security incidents you cannot avoid. Today and tomorrow, everyone will be hit. Right. How soon we can recover, that's a skill I want to learn. And that's my wish, to ensure that something goes wrong, we are able to, keep that up and running quickly. Yep.
So thank you so much for taking out time, talking to us, and patiently answering all your questions.
Thank you.
I think we were able to uncover at least some complexities that transpire in the BFSI world. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.